And I would like to welcome on floor Tobias Langanke from the European Environment Agency in Copenhagen. And Tobias has background in geography and has a long track record in image analysis, GIS, and at the EEA he's a project manager working on land. And by coincidence, he's going to present on the Copernicus land service today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can all relax. I don't have very detailed user statistics on the Swedish users, and not quite such an ambitious homework list for you. But nevertheless, and also no David from my side, but I will be myself standing there in the back. We have heard already about the global component of the land services, and we had a really beautiful presentation setting the stage and telling you why it is so important that we have better data on the land. And I will give you a little bit more of the nitty-gritty, down-to-earth view of what we are doing here for the part of the land services that's managed from the European Environment Agency. So I will try to show you what the products are and the services that we manage from Copenhagen, from EEA, and give you some examples. I'll try to focus a little bit more on what we call our local component, which is a little bit more of a hotspot view on things, because I heard before that this might be more of interest for the national users that are here, and try to give you some use cases. Of course, some of the products are really very new, so there we don't have too much use experience, but I'll try and give you some examples where I can. And then give you also some practical advice on access, download, and metadata for these products. I'm really happy to be in Stockholm here. We have also one of our service providers present here, Metria, with whom we produce part of the products. We have seen this already. Just to mention again, Copernicus is of course not just a space program. You see the satellite here. It is also a services program. This is not to deny that the space component currently is one of the most exciting things around, and especially for the land community, that the game-changing character of the Sentinels cannot even be overemphasized. So far, though, we had to work mainly with this part here, with the contributing missions, to create the value-added products that we have heard about. This we have seen also. I just put a red box around the part that is managed by the European Environment Agency, because the land service is split up, as we heard, into a GRC managed part and the part that is managed by the European Environment Agency. That is the so-called pan-European continental component, and the local component, these hotspots. These are the two parts that I will focus most on. We also have a dissemination, archiving, cataloging part, which I will mention only in passing, and a part on cross-service in situ coordination. That's coordination for those in situ data sets that are relevant for more than one service, so that's across the services. To go into a little bit more detail on this pan-European component, that does not only include high-resolution image mosaics and biophysical parameters. This is more a background data sets that you can get there. It contains two main groups of things that I will go into a bit more detail. One is Marine Land Cover, the well-established flagship land-use land cover product for Europe that's available since 1990, with now 4 time steps. And the mostly new HRLs, or high resolution layers, that we have been producing, most of them for the first time for the 2012 reference year, as part of this GIO phase, this GMES initial operations phase, which has now come to an end. In fact, Monday and Tuesday we had a nice little workshop conference in Copenhagen where we officially presented or marked the end of this GIO phase for our production and the start of the fully operational Copernicus phase. For these high resolution layers here, these are 5 groups of products on imperviousness or soil sealing, forest products, grassland, wetland, and water bodies. They are all available in 20 and 100 meter resolution. We produce all this for what we call the EEA 39 countries. That goes beyond the political boundaries of the EU to include the West Balkans, Turkey, Norway, Switzerland, and so forth. So we're talking about 6 million square kilometers roughly. And most of the products I'll mention here are produced for this whole area. And most of them are also already in almost final versions downloadable directly. I can show you later if you come to that computer in the back. Already downloadable in an almost final version as we speak. The high resolution layers are complementary information to existing data sets. So I'm not going to replace Green land cover, for example, but they add an additional more higher temporal and spatial resolution point of view to existing services for a use, a synergistic use rather than a replacement of existing products. And it provides some sort of relatively high resolution mapping on a continental scale of even small features. That's of course relative. If you work very local and regional, you will see where we get to the limits here. But imperviousness, forest, grasslands, wetland, water bodies, not all of them are mature in the same sense. We had the biggest little hiccups and small problems with grassland and wetland mappings, where we will need to make the biggest changes for the 2015 reference year. But overall, we have a successful run of first products. The soil seeding, the imperviousness data set here, it's worth mentioning that this is the only one of those that has been produced before as part of the GeoLand2 project for the 2006 and 2009 reference year. So there we're starting to build quite a time series already. This is visually just how these layers combined look for the Stockholm region. You know, obviously this being this part of Sweden, you have quite a lot of water visible there, and the green of the forest dominates, but you can also see the reddish colors here that are picked up by the soil seeding layer. Just a visual impression, that would be the 20 meter data for the 2012 reference year combined. Similar view for France with a little zoom into the Bordeaux region, just to give you again an impression of what the type of products we are mapping here. And as I said, all this can be downloaded and can be used already right now. Corine land cover, I'm not going into the details because that's a well-known product. We have 4 time steps here, 1990, 2000, 2006, and now 2012. A very different product, not based on the same type of remote sensing analysis in a semi-automated way as the other products, but based on a change mapping directly in visual interpretation and produced by the countries fully bottom-up. That's the main difference. The high-resolution layers and many of our other products are produced by industry in close cooperation with the countries. The countries do a verification and enhancement step, but here Corine is fully produced by the countries. And the resolution, of course, is one of the limitations. The status layers have a 25-hectare minimum mapping unit, the change product a 5-hectare minimum mapping unit. So there's your, if you like, limitation, but that's a known fact, and it's still the reference data set in terms of land cover and land use for Europe. A lot of things have not changed, so it's really comparable across the years. The current production stage, what you can download today is version 14.8, which just has Andalusia in southern Spain and the western part of Turkey missing. Otherwise, that's fully available for the 2012 reference here. We come to the so-called local component. That's where we take a hotspot view on certain issues that are considered really relevant. One is Urban Atlas. I'll say some more on this later. 2006, we have a status already, and we now producing for the 2012 reference year for urban areas. In the current production, everything above 50,000 inhabitants roughly. There are almost 700 urban areas that were mapped in 2012. And then riparian zones with a focus on biodiversity. I'll show this later. And Natura 2000, where the initial focus was on grassland ridge sites. For Urban Atlas, a joint initiative of DG Regio and DG Grow and partly implemented by EEA. It's a European-wide data set that's based on very high resolution imagery. So here we're talking about 2.5, 2-meter data, very different from the 20-meter optical data that we're using for the high resolution layers. And almost 700 functional urban areas mapped. And the time series we have already with 2006 and 12. Overall, this provides some sort of Europe-wide cross-thematic baseline for analysis inside urban areas. The main difference between 6 and 12, I just highlighted here, is that we have almost a doubling of the amount of functional urban areas that is covered. We are talking about, I could be wrong here, I think 1 million square kilometers almost. And the amount of rural classes has been increased based on user feedback to 10 rural classes. These functional urban areas are relatively large, and at their fringes they include a lot of more detail on the more rural classes now than they did before. This is just showing the increase in number and size of these functional urban areas. To give you an impression, we're actually covering quite a sizable chunk of Europe with this. And this just shows you the nomenclature increase here, the more detailed split up in the rural part. This is an example for Stockholm, the inner area for the 2012 functional urban area. As I said, 700 are being produced for 2012. Around half of them are already available for download, but production is still ongoing until end of next year. So we put them online as they come in. This is an example that shows you the increase in information that you get when you move from Greenland Cover 2000 here for Copenhagen to the Urban Atlas view of Copenhagen with much more detail in this data set. I'll give you a very quick example for an application of this done by DG Regio, and Hugo was presenting this actually yesterday at our meeting in Copenhagen. That was an example where access to public transport was the main issue. I'll skip through this relatively quickly, but just to give you an idea of the sort of analysis you can start doing with that kind of data. So here the location of bus, tram, train and metro stations was mapped for Stockholm. Then the average number of departures from these stations. Of course, that's data that's not freely available everywhere to the same extent, so that's cannot be easily done for 700 regions, but it's been done here. And it includes also a modeled, very detailed disaggregation of population data by these urban atlas polygons to know where exactly people are living that need to use these public transport services. And then you can, you look at 3 different extents from the inner city to a wider zone to get a more detailed picture. And you begin to get results like this that show you accessibility to public transport. So the redder here, the better the access is to public transport. And as you move out from the inner city to the larger urban zone here. Now, you could say as national users, but we have much better data in our city. This is probably true, but one of the big advantages of these kind of data sets and their use is that you can compare. So you can do things like this. You can compare across the region. These are other cities in the Baltic region where the similar analysis has been done. And of course, particularly if your results for your city are actually quite positive, as they are in the case of Stockholm, you are really, you like to do this kind of comparison. And it gets even more pronounced, the differences, of course, if you compare across Europe with other cities that have very different types and levels of access to public transport. So that just to give you one example of how this urban atlas data can be used in combination often with what you have available on the local scale. For the riparian zones, that's another of these local component hotspot products brand new in this case, so I can't give you too much information on use. It's literally only available for 2 or 3 weeks now. It's basically two things. It delineates the riparian zone. That's not something that exists as an accepted data set all over Europe. And it gives a detailed land use, land cover classification for within these riparian zones. So it maps this for a certain amount or for certain areas along the river hierarchy, the so-called strata level. So it's not mapping the whole river hierarchy, but a certain part of it. We had to limit it. It's at some stage a total area of more than 500,000 square kilometers, and an amazing amount of polygons was mapped as part of the land use, land cover mapping here. That's 5.6 million polygons. You can download this in these kind of delivery units. They are, of course, based on some sort of hydrologically meaningful units. I can't explain the delineation in detail to you, but just to say that 2 steps were involved: a potential riparian zone, more based on the elevation model, and more on vegetation, the observable riparian zone, and they came to some sort of modeled actual riparian zone, which was then based, the land cover mapping and land use mapping was then based on these zones, but that's available as a data set as well. And the main part, obviously, is this very detailed land use, land cover mapping for these zones. Oh, this is, in fact, a little bit where I come from in Germany, along the Rhine River. So it follows the classification follows the mass nomenclature. That's the mapping and assessment of ecosystems and their services. That's based on the EU biodiversity strategy to 2020. And it maps, I think it's a bit less than the 85. I think in reality it was something like 72 classes that were mapped here, and producing a vector product of pretty high value, we hope, and that can be explored regionally and nationally. We're quite convinced with some really good results. It also includes a mapping of green linear elements. That's not so well visible. There are only a few here, just to show that this was part of the mapping, and we consider rolling out such a mapping of green linear elements over the whole of the EA 39 area, based on very high resolution data. Of course, an enormous technical challenge, given the input imagery for this. This just gives you an overview that there were a lot of these green linear elements mapped, distinguished between trees and hedgerow elements. 1.5 million of those were mapped. But again, this is just for within these riparian zones. This is not yet rolled out for the whole of Europe. So all this available. To give you some more visual impressions, this is again Stockholm, in this case the soil seeding data, 20 meter. And here the urban atlas again, you've seen this already. This is what happens if you add the riparian zone land use, land cover mapping, these slightly darker parts here. And I included them obviously not because this is a particularly interesting, ecologically interesting riparian zone. It's pretty much in the center of Stockholm, but also to show you that the mapping is done consistently and harmonized across the product, so the polygons match, and also the classifications are comparable for these products. Possible use cases, I mean, obviously this was done mainly in view of supporting the EU biodiversity strategy by increasing our knowledge on ecosystems and their services. It has obvious links to other policies, but we also know that relatively few national assessments exist, and certainly not ones that are seamless and consistent across countries. So one of my first users I had on the phone yesterday is working in the Danube, and for a long project that considers a lot of countries along the Danube. And of course these types of data sets are really interesting for projects like this. But I talked to some Swedish users before, and I heard that even within countries there's often a very heterogeneous data situation from region to region. So even within a country, to have a harmonized data set is worth exploring. Very briefly on the local component, that's one of the few things that's actually only available for download in a few weeks, not yet. This was first focusing on grassland-rich Natura 2000 sites and what is happening in a buffer around them. So a buffer of 2 kilometers was included here. And here, similar classification scheme also based on the mass classification, slightly less, but also 62 thematic classes, and has a change mapping included from 2006 to 12. Here you can see a little bit which Natura 2000 areas were mapped. The plan is also to include further habitat types in future work for Natura 2000 local component. Just a few words on the cross-service in situ coordination. At the workshop earlier this week, this reference data access platform was launched. This is more an entry point node for service operators to facilitate access and interchanging local and national data sets. So that might be something that's probably where you as country users are more requested to provide data that will feed into this. But two reference data sets are worth mentioning here. The digital elevation model, EUDEM, which is already as a 25-meter data set available for download, and an upgrade is ongoing, so this will improve, and is the best non-commercial DEM available for Europe that's fully consistent. Of course, some countries have their national data sets, but a consistent Europe-wide one. And EU Hydro, which is a river drainage and network model, which will soon be available, is only in a beta version, currently in-house, but will be made available soon, is also undergoing an upgrade and is supposed to be fully harmonized in the end with the EU DEM system. Where are we going with this? So as I said, the 2012 reference year production, we struggled with a lot of challenges in the beginning, mostly related to the 2012 reference year being very difficult in terms of input imagery. I mean, the ESA colleagues know this. We had them on the phone weekly almost for some period where we struggled with the availability of input imagery for the 2012 reference year. This GeoLand phase came to an end now, and we're moving towards the 2015 production, and we will have quite some changes in the grassland and wetland production. We will reanalyze part of existing time series, in this case imperviousness. 6, 9, and 12 will be fully reanalyzed, the whole time series, so that we have even better comparable time series for the soil sealing. A new high-resolution layer on green linear features is under discussion. I mentioned this. That would map it literally for the whole area. A snow and ice cover service is under exploration that would build on nationally existing initiatives. I can't say too much about this. And we will extend and continue riparian zones and urban atlas. In the case of the riparian zones, by extending possibly the levels of the hierarchy that we include in the mapping. And for urban atlas, by both adding a third dimension, a height dimension, in at least the core zones of the urban areas, and for extending the scope to the EEA 39 countries, so widening it to include the countries that are currently not included in urban atlas. And then, as I said, for Natura 2000, we will try to move into including new habitat types, and this time it was a grassland focus. A coastal zone monitoring is also under discussion that would include marine elements and land elements to really get this transition zone better under control. How you can explore these data sets and where you can download is using this portal. It's under development. It will be improved. Currently, the link to global here links directly to the GRC global land page. This gets you to the pan-European component, to the local component, and to the in situ part here. And all these, most of these products are available as download, and you can select which versions you need. It's not yet the very final mosaics. The validation is still ongoing, but we decided to make available what we have at this stage, which is very close to final, and then replace it with the validated whole EEA 39 mosaics. Currently, they're still split in these lots, and lot 1 would be the one most relevant for you in the northern countries, but that will be replaced by a full EEA 39 mosaic in the future. And metadata is included both as XML files in the tabs, and for the high resolution layers I have also created an easily readable PDF document for those of you that, like me, struggle with the intuitiveness of XML files. So this is all done by a relatively small team at EEA, and we have all of them here. Some of them not for much longer. Georgi Büttner, one of the fathers of the Korean land cover service, is due to retire soon. But if you have data questions or download questions or any other feedback from the user side, feel free to contact me here under this email address, and also in the coming coffee break, which is nicely long, I've seen, an hour to make interaction possible. I will be standing at the first computer here, and I can show you directly how to access the data and what we have so far and answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobias. That was really excellent to hear. And there's a lot of very useful material already out there in this service. And now you know that you not only need to visit David, you will also need to visit Tobias in the other corner of the room. So before we move on to the coffee break, I would like to see if there are some questions on the floor. There is one.
Thank you very much for this excellent presentation, Tobias. And I also would like to turn back to Pierre's very frank presentation. User uptake is certainly not an easy task, which was also discovered to some extent at the Land Service workshop yesterday in Copenhagen. Before putting my question, actually, I would like to make an announcement, and that is that I, Stefan Nilsson here, and also Thomas Klein, are the Swedish representatives into the user forum, and you are all very welcome to approach us also with questions and the user requests for all the services in respect of Copernicus. So we are here for you as well in this respect. Then to my question, which actually is for both you, Tobias, and also Pierre, because the European Commission here to some extent has been a bit reluctant to actually deal with the coastal zone. Both of you are mentioning the coastal zone. But how to improve the collaboration between the land service and the marine service on the coastal zone?
It's a good question. I mean, this is one of the services that's in planning, and I'm not personally involved in this planning at all. So, to be really honest, I couldn't answer your question right now. I can find out and come back, and some other people here have better ideas on this. But I'm aware, of course, that better coordination is needed there, because these communities are not traditionally very closely aligned.
We see that the European Commission feels challenged a bit somehow.
It's my role to take the difficult questions. So it's not just a technical issue. So I think that it's true that we are planning to look into the coastal zones to see, for example, what the marine aspects can bring onto the land and what the land can bring into the sea. The fact is that we try this exercise, but we face an issue. In some countries, this is already dealt by private companies. So this is, I think, an issue that we have to tackle very seriously, not to kill businesses already existing. So this is something that we are analyzing at this moment in time. We will discuss with you in the user forum, as you said. So all the people to speak with, David, and so you see how many people you can speak with today. And so for the time being, there is not a final answer. I know that we spoke with Pierre, we spoke with the EEA, and we are ready to do something, but we have, first of all, to analyze this tricky point.
You know that the interested entity were not supposed to speak after the Commission said something. But I just want to say that there is a political issue and there are technical issues as well. And in the tenders I was presenting, there is a theme which is links with coastal environment. And you're very much welcome to propose something where we could have good technical discussions between what is done or what is important for the land and what could be done and what is important for the sea. And we can start with this. I mean, we have the river in the middle, and we are very happy to have good ideas about improving the situation at this level, starting with the technical and scientific side, and then we will build on that. And we go step by step, but we are working on this.
Okay, thank you. Then I think we conclude here. Thanks again very much, Tobias.
Thank you.
Thank you, and there is...